Well, I was trying to get this out in time by Friday the 13th, but I didn't. A day late isn't terrible, though. I've been distracted from posting lately due to a couple of side projects I'm working on. It always makes me feel guilty for doing so, but I've been burning the creative candle at all ends these days. More on that coming very soon. Still, I try to celebrate every Friday the 13th on this channel, and it's time to check out Jason X. This is the first time I've reviewed this movie, but if you're looking for more Friday the 13th reviews, opinions, and coverage, be sure to check out my previous posts on the franchise. But let's jet forward to the future and talk about the 10th installment in the Friday the 13th series, Jason X. Jason X, aka Friday the 13th Part 10, was released in 2002, it's streaming on Tubi, and it was recently released on 4K from Arrow Films. It's directed by Jim Isaac and written by Todd Farmer, and Louis Abernathy took a stab at the script in an uncredited role. Also, David Cronenberg wrote his own lines. Jason X begins in the far future time of 2010, an odd year to start, but I'm guessing it was supposed to represent the day after tomorrow concept rather than the distant future. Jason Voorhees, again played by Kane Hodder for one last time, has seemingly been captured and is bound and chained in the Crystal Lake Research Facility and is set for cryogenic imprisonment. But instead of freezing the killer, Dr. Wimmer, played by the one and only David Cronenberg, wants to study how Jason is able to regenerate his body after so much wear and tear and attempts to transfer him to his Scranton facility. Things go wrong, shall we say, and a cryogenics expert, Rowan, played by Lexa Doig, ends up being accidentally frozen along with Jason. Years later, in the year 2455, a science team is exploring the uninhabitable Earth and recover Jason and Rowan and bring them back to their ship, the Grendel, where both of them are thawed out for study. This leads to Jason rampaging through the ship and terrorizing its crew in his usual manner, only this time in space. But just when they thought they've defeated Jason, the ship's medical tech reanimates him with nanotechnology, creating the all-new, all-metal, all-attitude Uber Jason. Jason X was made in the New Line era of the Friday the 13th franchise. It's not my favorite era. The studio's grand plan was to get a hold of the Friday rights in order to finally pair Jason with Freddy in one movie, and plenty of articles and videos have depicted how insane the process was to get that made. In the meantime, they wanted to keep Jason in the public eye that was slowly shifting towards other horror genres like found footage and torture porn, as well as the self-referential sea change that the Scream franchise created. Now, I'm not one to fall for all of the conspiracy theories, though more and more these theories are being proven true daily, but rumor has it that New Line never really looked at the Friday the 13th series with much respect. Sure, they were happy to cash a check if a Friday the 13th film they made was successful, but making the slasher true to the franchise, powerful, well-written, and most importantly, scary, were not their priorities. The studio was made by Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, and they were and always will be Team Freddy. It's because of that bias that Friday had always been the lesser franchise that seemed to fuel every aspect of the time the Friday the 13th brand was in the hands of New Line. It's because of this theory that New Line really didn't give two figs about Jason or its fandom that I think I've always disliked Jason X, as shuffling the scene to space is the most generic tonal shift a franchise can undergo. Hell, they couldn't even throw the fandom a bone and call it Friday the 13th Part 10, but I'm sure that was more due to legal reasons than disrespect. Still, I guess my desperate need for Jason to be taken more seriously has lessened a bit with age, and returning to the film was much more enjoyable than it was when I first saw it in theaters way back in 2002. But the film gets more wrong than right, and I'll deal with that in a minute, as I'll start with the positives I took away from this revisit with Jason X. While I think sci-fi should be as far away from this series as possible, I do think that writer Todd Farmer and director Jim Isaac did well with the budget they were given. Yes, the film looked like one of those syndicated sci-fi shows that used to be on late at night or on Saturday afternoons, and the script reads like one of them as well, as it lifts heavily from every popular sci-fi movie and comic book trope it can think of. But a lot of the scenes, like the gaming holodeck sequence where Jason slices a monster in two, surprising the two gamers playing the simulation, as well as the scenes in space of the Grendel and the Solaris space station, all looked pretty cool. I especially like the shape of the space rover that looks a little like the head of a hockey mask if you look at it in the right light and squint a little. I love the backstory of how, after his capture, they tried to issue the death penalty to Jason many times using various methods to no effect. The reason why all of this was glossed over in favor of the distant future sci-fi theme is because they wanted to respect continuity in the series a little bit by setting the film after the yet-to-be-made Freddy vs. Jason movie, and setting it that far into the future made it safer to skip over that film and still try to tell a cohesive story. Still, I'd much rather see the story leading up to Jason's capture and attempts at capital punishment than what we got with Jason X. There are even a few side plots that I found entertaining, like the strange relationship between Sonoran, played by Chuck Campbell, and KM-14, played by Lisa Ryder, which mirrored the relationship between some depictions of Dr. Frankenstein and the Bride. I also liked the play with simulation versus reality, which is used in some key scenes. These are not necessarily themes I was hoping for in a Friday the 13th movie, but they are dealt with in a fairly interesting manner here. There were also some fun characters like the sexually fueled Janessa, played by Melissa Aid, who tries to seduce everyone on the ship, and the badass Sergeant Brodsky, played by Peter Mensah, who rivals only Stephen Williams' Creighton Duke in sheer badassery. Even writer Todd Farmer himself has a lot of fun in the few moments he was on screen, and David Cronenberg even put forth the effort to rewrite his own dialogue for his cameo in the opening scenes. And I always kind of like it when they put an asshole character you can't help but root for to get the tip of Jason's blade embedded in them, and Jonathan Potts does that well with Professor Lowe. While the gore isn't particularly gruesome or excessive, there are a few inventive kills. Of course, the scene everyone talks about, the one where Jason dips the woman's face in liquid nitrogen, is pretty cool, but it was lifted directly from an X-Files episode. There's a more interesting kill as one of the soldiers is tossed on a giant drill bit and slowly twirls down it before coming to a dead stop in front of some other soldiers. One of my favorite sequences happens right at the beginning as Jason takes out an entire group of armed guards, whipping his chains around and ending the sequence with a spear straight through Cronenberg's back. That's the cool type of carnage that I come to a Friday the 13th movie to see, though rarely get to see it. I also liked the fun they had with the kid who gets his arm chopped off by a frozen Jason, which shows how far technology has come in the 400 plus years the killer has been in cryosleep. That's pretty much all the positives I can muster for Jason X. So let's really get into the problems with Jason X. First and foremost, more so in this film than in any other, Jason is seen way too much in this movie. As much as I like Jason Voorhees, he's best left in the shadows. There are far too many scenes of Jason just walking around in brightly lit areas and simply standing around looking mean. Sure, director Jim Isaac knows how to get a good ominous shot of the character, and I think the extreme close-ups are good, but the longer the movie gets, these ominous shots are exchanged with Jason simply walking around from one corridor of the spaceship to another. The most important thing about Jason is that he needs to be scary, and apart from a scant few scenes towards the beginning, he isn't, especially after he's turned into Uber Jason. It's as if they were so proud of the design that they had to light it brightly to show off every nook and cranny, and by doing so, all horror is washed away from the character. By the time Jason is on the holodeck killing Bim Betts, all menace in the character is gone. Jason is at his core an outsider. He wears a mask because he is ashamed of his face. He doesn't want to be seen, so being in the open like he is in this movie should be a weakness for him. Instead, Jason walks through the corridors of the spaceship as if he's John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever at times. Jason X really drives the point home that sex, drugs, and partying is Jason's prime motivator to his mayhem. Now, this has been implied from the beginning, but it's in this installment where all nuance is thrown off a cliff. The not-so-subtle way that Jason's killing spree represents the moral decay of America's youth was just shoved in your face in Jason X, to the point of parody, which of course murders all sense of the gravitas of the message. When Jason wakes up on the ship, numerous people on board are having sex, which makes Jason sprout up like an erect penis on the operating table and go on another killing spree. While his reawakening is okay, as it does play with metaphor, the sex-death thing is done to death, and I feel Jason is more than that, or at least the writing should be more than that. Yes, many an essay has been written dissecting the association between sex and death in horror movies, specifically the Friday the 13th series. Yes, Scream happened, which thinks it is honoring slasher films, but really seems to be belittling them, breaking them down to simplified rules to get a laugh. But in examining and dissecting the slasher film to this degree, it explains the joke and any element of effectiveness evaporates. So a horror film that basically acknowledges the tropes of the genre isn't really there to scare, it's there to poke fun at it. In Jason X, the worst thing happens. Jason isn't scary. He's not scary because he's shown too often, but also because it really doesn't seem like he poses much of a threat to these Whedon-esque quippers. This is shown in the first scene, even before he's unfrozen, when a kid gets his arm cut off, and it's easily repaired by tech a few scenes later. Everyone but Jason has a one-liner in Jason X, and the one person who should always look cool is Jason. When someone comments on the way he looks in a sarcastic manner, when someone quips after shooting him or hitting him, or when someone simply makes fun of him, he's not scary anymore. Jason is judgment coming after you for simply being in his vicinity, because being near Jason means breaking his rules. You're trespassing, you're crossing his boundaries, and you're probably having a good time while doing it. So when Jason finally appears, you're in trouble. I get it. There's a need to laugh in horror movies in order for there to be a release. There's always been comedic elements in these Friday the 13th films, but when the axe falls, things get dire, and the quips should die when people realize that they're in deep shit. That doesn't happen in Jason X. Even after their crewmates have been murdered, jokes are told. Sure, I like the line, "He just wants his machete back," too, and that absurd line shows how out of touch that particular character is, but it also makes us laugh at Jason standing there, brightly lit, in the open, in front of a group of people. The point of this lengthy dive into the themes of Friday the 13th is that it wasn't taken seriously and never really respected by those in front of or behind the camera, and especially the dollar people behind the movie. This point couldn't be illustrated more clearly as it is during the climactic holograph sequence where somehow the scientists on board the Grendel understand Jason so much that they put together a cartoonish sequence of two gals stripping right in front of Jason. Sure, the punchline with Jason pummeling the two gals together in sleeping bags is good for a laugh, but it also lampoons one of Hodder's and Jason's most iconic kills. The entire goofy sequence takes place at a time when things are most dire. It's right before the climax. Most of the crew of the Grendel has been killed, and this scene undercuts all sense of horror just for a laugh. Jason isn't scary here. He's the lead-in for a joke, and that pisses me off as it does now, as it did when I first saw it. Again, first and foremost, Jason should be scary, and here it shows how all involved got the character wrong and maybe never understood him or wanted to understand him in the first place. Since he first donned his mask in Friday the 13th Part 7, A New Blood, Kane Hodder has owned the role of Jason. But in Jason X, he really tries his hardest to bring the menace. In the first scene, Jason simply stares at the ground until a guard enters his perimeter, and then he looks his way and simply squints his eye in hatred. This scene speaks volumes. If Jason were free, the guard would be toast. Hodder shows how good of an actor he is by simple eye movement here. While I don't really like the baggy shredded clothes, I understand why they did that. It makes him more of an undefinable shape than a man of substance and weight, and with this mysterious form comes menace. Still, I think I would have loved to have seen Jason sporting some kind of prison jumpsuit. I think it would have been an interesting new look for the killer. I doubt anyone would be able to get near the guy to undress him, but it would have been an interesting new look. Uber Jason? Sure, it's cool. Looks a little bit too much like the Predator mask for my tastes, but I think that was purposeful. The battle armor makes him look more like a Power Ranger than a serial killer, but for what it was, I guess the design was okay. I think it feels more like a remnant of the excessive and extreme geared up look of superheroes in the 90s like Cable and Ghost Rider, but it still works. I do like it that Jason has stubbly hair at the beginning, and then it's burned off in favor of a pulpy baldness after his upgrade. Though I think the story handles sci-fi elements well, it does basically cast Jason as the xenomorph and pits him against scientists and space marines. Farmer gets a little too close to Scott's Alien and Cameron's Aliens for my taste, as he apes the scripts almost beat for beat. I don't mean to be a dud and take a fun romp like Jason X too seriously, but someone has to do it. It certainly seems like all involved were simply interested in making a goofy sci-fi movie with Jason in it rather than a scary Jason movie with sci-fi elements. A slasher on a spaceship can work, Alien did it, and Todd Farmer's script got on its knees and opened wide for that film, but instead of sheer terror, Farmer filled this movie with camp, and director Jim Isaac reinforced it by increasingly losing a grasp on the horror elements. Maybe there was a point in Jason X production where there was a little bit more of a serious tone, who knows, but the final result was a film that definitely was better than the hunk of turds Jason Goes to Hell was, but still manages to be less scary than that disaster of a sequel. If I reach down deep and try to drown out that Friday the 13th fan that winces every time this movie misunderstands and misinterprets my favorite horror movie franchise, I guess I can see this as a fun sci-fi romp, exemplative of the Whedon-esque era of the sci-fi genre. But it still hurts a little watching it, if I'm being honest. What about you? What'd you think of Jason X? Was it an offense to the series? Did it bring the franchise to a point of parody? Or could you look past that and enjoy it for what it is? Let me know what your thoughts are about Jason X down in the comments. Please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're